Um, yeah, thanks for being available for this. I am joined here with Aziz from Avant Assessment. Thank you. I know this was kind of late notice to join this, and so glad you're here. And I'm going to share my screen. Hi, Max. I can see some faces. Okay. So you will have all these slides after tomorrow, as well as a formal communication with a lot of this information. Because of the looming PO deadline, we really wanted to come together. And again, I have Aziz from Avant here. So just quick overview of why we're here. Reconnecting, framing, and then Aziz will talk about the Avant assessments and then the ordering process. That's the main urgency right now, knowing the deadline next week. So the objectives, hopefully after today, you're able to understand what Avant assessments are available and in which languages, and articulate the process to order the assessments, which Aziz will walk us through. So again, the seal is available. This is a review for all of you to graduating seniors who meet the requirements for a Regents diploma, and they need 3 points on the English side and 3 points on the world language side. Not every one of your amazing candidates will need to take a 1D or 2D assessment, but this information today is for those students who do. They need an extra point. And we've already talked about how we don't always want to wait until July for the AP scores to come in. So if you have some students in a category who would benefit from taking a 1D or 2D assessment, really pay attention today to how that works. So again, this is the point system. And so the role of today is to really about the work streams tracker, and Aziz's name is one bullet within the work streams tracker. We're zooming in to really think about how to order those assessments your students might need. And so overview of the assessments. So, yeah. So why don't I introduce Aziz now? Because that was kind of just the framing of why we're here, and that these assessments can satisfy criterion 1D for English or 2D in multiple world languages, over 20 different languages that I know your students are working towards. So I will stop sharing my screen. I will make you host, sorry. Stop sharing.
Yeah, I think I can just share without making me a host.
Okay, cool.
So we can just, yeah.
Okay, and I'll let people in. You introduce
Exactly.
yourself.
That
Okay, cool.
Perfect. Okay. So let me,
Aziz.
yeah, thank you. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay. Well, thank you, Jill, for helping for your help to set this up. Hoping that this will be really informative for the teachers here. So, as Jill mentioned, the test will be used for the seal of biliteracy and can also be used for Pathway for +1 assessments, the 4S assessment. But what I'm going to do right now is just to give you a little bit of background of what STAMP test is all about, and then how to administer the assessment, how to access the reports, and then best practices. And if you have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat, and then Jill can just share it with me, Jill or Amy. So what I'm going to start with right now is this slide, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. There are many, many types of assessments out there, as you may already know, but there are three main ones that are widely used in the language teaching world, and they all funnel into language acquisition process. So we have achievement testing, which measures the ability and repeating certain elements that are taught at a particular level. So an end of chapter exam is a really good example for this one. And then we have performance testing, which measures the ability in using a language in a rehearsed and a controlled situation. So IPAs, or integrated performance assessment, is a good example for this one. And then we have proficiency assessments, which measures the ability in using language in a real world context in a non-rehearsed situation. And this is what our assessment is all about. So the STAMP test is proficiency based, and we're trying to see how you're able to use a language in these different contexts and scenarios at that point in time when you take the test, basically. So I'm going to start with STAMP 4S. 4S basically stands for 4 skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. STAMP itself stands for Standards-Based Measurement of Proficiency, originally developed at the University of Oregon at the Center for Applied Second Language Studies about 23 years ago at this point, as the first fully online and computer adaptive test in the world. A lot of folks use the test for multiple purposes, whether it's for benchmarking, monitoring progress and growth, and seeing how the students are progressing year after year, and then the credentialing aspect of things. So, of course, the seal of literacy, hence why we're having this call. The content of the STAMP test is always validated by field studies. So we run pilots whenever we release new content. We run pilots, run psychometric analyses and branch modeling in the back end just to make sure that we're capturing proficiency in an accurate and rigorous manner. I mentioned that STAMP stands for standards based, and it is based on the actual standards. So a score of 1 on the STAMP scale means novice low. Score of 2 corresponds to novice mid, and so on. And this is a crosswalk between the STAMP scale and the other common proficiency scales. So we have the WIDA, the ILR, the CEFR, or the European Framework, and the AP, the College Board Continuum. And a lot of AP teachers were able to implement or incorporate the STAMP data in their practice to help figure out whether the students are a good fit in that class or they're en route to get the required score for AP. Moving on. So well, I mentioned that the STEM test is fully online, but it's also computer adaptive. What is that supposed to mean? So let's just go through a quick scenario. We have a student who's taking a Spanish test, and this individual, he started with a group of questions. In the first group of questions, he was able to answer with 90% of accuracy. So the computer would realize this kid is doing relatively well. Let's push him to harder group of questions and see how he's doing right there. He continues to score with higher levels of accuracy, then he's going to continue at that advanced level path. If the accuracy levels drop at that point, then he's going to face questions that are a little bit more appropriate to his language proficiency levels. So until he finishes 30 questions in reading or 30 in listening, then the student will be placed in the appropriate level of proficiency. Okay. The other piece about the computer adaptive nature of the test is that the receptive skills will inform leveling of the productive skills, meaning that the score the student will get in the reading section will determine how difficult the writing prompts are going to be. Same thing goes with listening and speaking. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is walk you through the login process, but I'm going to pause here and see if I have any questions. Oh, I see a hand raised.
It's me.
Okay.
Uh, so you had that, if you go back to the previous slide about the handwritten
Oh, yes,
option,
absolutely.
and I think we're going to, especially because these students are typing their projects, I think we were going to assume everyone would be typing using the computer. And we know some of the assessments, Mandarin requires a keyboard, but then the other ones, there's pop-up keyboards. I just say this because the handwritten option, right, is used in very rare cases, and that has an additional cost, correct, Aziz?
That is correct. It's a $5 flat processing fee. And it is optional if they want to add it to the language that they are using, whether it's Mandarin, Arabic, Hebrew, or even the WS languages.
Okay, and Greg has a question about how the writing's graded and by whom.
Yeah, so the rating for reading and listening is automated. So it's multiple choice questions, and the scores will be available immediately. For writing and speaking, will be reviewed by our trained human raters, and it'll take up to 7 business days. It could take a couple more days, given the spring testing sort of influx of testing. So it's a human raters. They go through a rigorous training, and sometimes it's even crossed between other rater managers.
And is Russian in writing?
Uh, Not sure if I understand that question. I mean, it's available in 4 skills, and there's a writing section, and is definitely available in handwritten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because of the characters, is it available digitally, or do students have to handwrite their answers?
So you can type it using a keyboard or on an on-screen keyboard if that's possible. And then you do have the handwriting option. So if you don't have a keyboard that has the actual characters, the Russian characters, then yeah, you probably want to use an on-screen keyboard. If you have a touch screen keyboard, that's fine. That's even better actually. So the keyboard will pop up on your screen, and then the student can type the response
So,
instead of.
so the computer will have the keyboard, right? I mean,
Yes, so
the
it's usually,
program.
yes, absolutely. It is usually activated within the system. So it's if you're using a Mac, a PC, or a Chromebook, you go into the system and then activate that particular language, the keyboard of that language.
Yeah, and I put in the chat, and we do have some student-facing resources. So this is real high level, but for individual languages, you'll get a sense of how to prepare your students, what you need to prepare, things like that.
Right. And one thing to add is a lot of the schools who are trying to add languages, they defer to the IT people at the school. So usually they would be able to add that language in their for that particular device. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
About the level?
Sure.
I've been using Apple tests.
Mhm.
So I think it's at the Regents level, like the low-T level, but not, beyond it, I guess. So Avon is, I suppose, at the Regents level as well?
Yes. So when you say regions, it is tied to the actual standards, but Jill, I think you want to address this.
Yeah, so that test, yeah. So that test that you took last year, the Apple, students needed to take Form B because that's the one that goes beyond checkpoint B, beyond intermediate mid. But for Avant, since it's computer adaptive, the stamp 4S, it's just one assessment. So you don't need to worry about ordering different forms. You would just order Avant for stamp 4S, and then it's adaptive. So we'll make sure the students can get the scores they need. And he's showing right there the requisite scores needed, and I'll make sure you have this chart. It's 6, right, in the category 1, 2 languages, and then a score of 5 in all the 4 sub-skills for category 3, 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leo added in that students who aren't used to on-screen keyboards may be more comfortable with handwritten. So, okay, that's good to know. I think that'll come up in the ordering and planning for POs, since there is an additional $5 per student for the handwritten option.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, one last question for Jill. Sorry. So I have students who already use Apple and passed at the highest level. So it's still.
Yeah, their scores carry over. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Is it compared to the Lotte or AP Spanish? So the Avant test itself, again, computer adaptive. So they're going to see some easier questions first. Checkpoint A questions, checkpoint B questions, but then the requisite score, the score that they will need to meet CELA biliteracy requirements, is a score of 6, which is actual intermediate high, which is more aligned to AP Spanish.
Yep.
Okay, back to you, Aziz. Thanks.
No worries. No, these are great questions because yeah, I get the question about AP a lot. And many teachers that I work with, actually 2 of my colleagues, former educators, they were using stamp in their AP classes. So it's certainly something that is widely used to just help and mitigate some of the things that teachers might face. But at any rate, so moving on, this year, a lot of the schools will use these standard logins. And the way we set up testing is per group. We do not need to have the student information during the setup process at all. And I'm going to show you an example in a little bit. But just to walk you through how students would access the test. So each student will use a group test code and password. So for example, let's say I teach Spanish 1, Jill teaches Spanish 2. I have 10 students under my class. Jill has 10, 20 in total. So all 10 students under my class will use the same group test code and password that would look fairly similar to this one. Once they log in, they'll be asked to create a unique login name. It is typically, or a lot of schools use the school ID number. And I think the New York City Department of Ed has a preference on that as well. Is that correct, Jill?
Ask again, and maybe Amy can speak to it too. Amy's here with the Office of Assessment, by the way, and they've been working with Avant and the stamp assessment for quite a few years. So Amy has a lot to say about the process too, and guiding schools to this. But can you ask your question again, Aziz? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say if it's the ID number, I'm pretty sure it is the ID number that was
We,
what, yeah.
yes, we used the OSIS number last year. So you would roster your students using their last name, their first name, and their OSIS number as their login.
Okay, perfect. So the OSS number is the one that is widely used just to make it easier to map your data, to map that information to your internal data and what have you. So yeah, this is when the system starts to identify the individual. Once they hit next, they'll see something like this, a profile page. Not all of the fields are required, but if they do enter more than what's required, you would still see it on your end. And then from there, they'll start testing. You notice here that test takers can continue the test later on. So you can definitely administer the test over multiple sessions. You do not have to complete the whole thing in one sitting. So you can do reading and writing today, come back tomorrow, and finish with listening and speaking. And in order to come back and complete the test, students will need to stop tests, obviously. Use the same credentials, the same group test code and password, continue test, and then the system will welcome them back and they'll just use the same OSS number to continue testing. So that's pretty much how it works to log in. And then again, reading before writing, listening before speaking. So receptive has to be completed to be able to start with a productive component. These are just sample or screenshots from our sample tests. So you can always check our sample tests online, which is something that I always encourage people to do. Check the sample test for two main reasons. One is to make sure that the technology is working. You know, the device, you know, you're able to record, you're able to listen, you're able to type, and all that stuff. The other piece is to familiarize test takers with the user interface and set some expectations when it comes to the difficulty of the questions at each level of proficiency. So you'll see 2 novice level items, 2 intermediate, 2 advanced. Obviously, the full test will not include that, but it'll just give them an idea. Okay, this is the length of the passage at an intermediate level question, for example, and then the difficulty of the questions. But you'll get a general theme across all languages. So with the reading section, you'll have the passage on the left-hand side. The questions and the answer options are on the right-hand side. The writing section will have the image, the prompt in English, and then the same prompt recorded in the target language. So students can listen to that in that language, Arabic in this particular example, and then obviously be able to type in their response on the right-hand side. Listening section is fairly similar to the reading section. You'll have the questions and the answer options on the right-hand side, and then you'll be able to listen to the passage by clicking on this play button right there. So speaking is also fairly similar to the writing section. Image, a prompt in English, the prompt recorded in the target language. The thing that I want to highlight about speaking is students will obviously be able to listen to their recording, which is highly encouraged. You want to make sure that, you know, the microphone was able to capture that response. If they want to add to it, they can click on this little plus button right there. And if they don't like the entirety of it, they can delete it and re-record the whole thing again. So what I would personally recommend, and this is just more of best practices, if you have corded headphones, they'll be ideal. Wireless headphones are fine. It's just they don't provide the best recording quality. Same thing goes with the device. You know, if it's a laptop or a Chromebook or whatever, it might not deliver the best recording quality. So corded headphones, whether it's a USB cord or an AUX cord, that would be great. Okay. So believe I mentioned some of this already, but I'm just gonna cover this real quick. So for reading and listening, you'll have 30 questions each. On average, it takes about 35 to 40 minutes to complete these sections or each of these sections. And then the scores will be available immediately. Writing and speaking will have 3 prompts each. It takes a little bit less time to complete these sections, so 20 to 25 minutes. And the scores will be available within 7 business days. And again, spring testing can be a little hectic, so it can take another day or two to have the scores ready. All right, so we just covered the 4S, which covers a lot of the quote unquote commonly taught languages. So it covers Spanish, French, Italian, German, Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, Hebrew, Arabic, and all these, and Hindi as well. There are a lot of other languages that are, again, widely spoken among heritage speakers. So we have Turkish, we have Vietnamese, Tagalog, and a long list of languages. So we have over 46 languages. Some of them fall under the WS. The WS covers writing or assesses writing and speaking only. It is semi-adaptive and it is designed to or for the heritage speakers of that particular language. Semi-adaptive means that instead of having them go through a full listening section or a full reading section, they will go through a series of can-do statements. And this will act as a self-evaluation. Based on that self-evaluation, that will determine the difficulty of the writing and the speaking prompt. So this is how it's semi-adaptive. So based on their own self-evaluation, that will determine how difficult the prompts are going to be. All right. So the reporting end of things, I'm just going to pause here and see if there are any questions that I haven't covered. Okay. So the average length is, about 2 to 2.5 hours. Again, the test itself is not timed. There is no time limit that was set on our end. So if you want to dedicate full 3 hours, you can do that. You can break it down over multiple sessions. You can do 1 section per day and allocate the time you believe is going to be enough. And for accommodations, generally speaking, giving students that extra time is what, is really what covers it for these who need of accommodations. So if the students take the test,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there's a lot of questions about best practices, and that was the communication we were working on. So like, for the purposes of today, it's 3:25. Aziz is giving the broad overview, and then we really want to zoom on the ordering process because that's the urgency with your looming PO deadline. And then just as a note, again, zooming back out, I think if you order the assessments by March 15th, I would say I'll get you all the information about planning for administration. It can be, I would say, after April 1st. And then they have a window until, we're saying May 24th. All students, especially all graduating seniors, 12th graders, should finish all 4 portions of the assessment by May 24th. That will allow for scoring and retakes and things like that. So we'll walk you through that. But the first piece and the most urgent thing today is understanding how to order.
Yep.
Okay.
So let's then jump into that actually, because I was just going to walk through the reporting end of things. It's fairly straightforward. Just going to go back here real quick. So for each group, remember we had a test code and password for each group for the students to access the test, right? So for you'll have a report code to access the results for that particular group. And then you'll be able to see all of your students listed down here. So I'll give you an average of how for each skill and how the students are doing in that particular group, and then the distribution against the stamp scale. So it's nice to see some bell curves. You don't want to see a whole lot of outliers. And then if you scroll down on that same view, you'll be able to see something like this, where each line represents a test taker. You'll see the timestamps and the scores. If you want to see a little bit more information, you can click on the student name and something like this will pop up. The thing I want to highlight right here is you'll be able to go in and read what the student wrote in the writing section and then listen to their speaking submission as well. So you can go in and use that as feedback if you want to have If you want to sit down with the student and just give them that, recommendation post-testing. So drilling down to the individual report, this is just the top portion. You'll have basic information about the individual, the scores for each skill, and then the composite score to average all 4 skills. The rest of the report would look like this. So I'm gonna zoom in real quick. So students will see a level description, meaning that this is what they can do with their current language skills and suggestions, tailored feedback for this individual on how to improve to the next level of proficiency. And I'm just gonna go back right here, but I'm gonna pause. I'm seeing a hand raised. Gregory, yeah.
Hi. Actually, I saw you had the recommended times for each section.
Right.
But just so I want to understand, it's actually untimed. That's just how much time it usually approximately takes, correct?
That's the average time, correct?
Okay.
The one,
Right.
yep.
There's no
There's-
like stopwatch to cut them off.
yeah, you can do it. Yeah, whenever
Okay,
you want.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But I also want to mention best practice. If you do want to break down testing over multiple sessions, it's ideal to complete that one section. So if you're starting with reading today, or writing, so
Right.
you don't want to just leave the room without them completing that session. It's just, like I said, it's best practices.
Yeah.
But regardless, the system will save that last bit, and when students log back in, they'll continue where they stopped. Okay. So during the setup process, I will need to know how many students you plan to assess, and then the languages. So if you could kindly share that with me so I can create a PO, and then you can share it with the Department of Education. If you have a procurement person at your school, usually this person will put in a requisition for a PO. We, as from the Avant team, we will just wait to see, and we will wait until we get the official PO that is usually sent to us directly from the New York City Department of Ed. Sometimes schools will have the copy of the official PO, so we can receive it from both. That's fine. But we cannot fulfill the order until we get that official PO. So just want to highlight that. Just want to show you a couple examples of what an official PO looks like. This is what an official PO looks like. Just an example right there. Because sometimes I get the requisition. Where's the requisition? Yep, here we go. So this is the requisition example. It says this is not an official order. Document sent officially to the vendor. I think people are just a little confused about this one. So they give me that document and they would say, all right, here's our PO. Let's move forward with the process. So just wanted to clarify that piece. The requisition is not an official PO. This is the official PO. All right. And
Aziz, I just wanted to kind of jump in, and again, I have a formal communication kind of building all these things out for you. We just wanted to give you broad strokes. And to Aziz's point, I'm hoping that all of you know who at your school you'd talk to, tomorrow about this. Hopefully your school leader, right? Your SBCs, you have an administrator, talk to them and say, okay. And the official wording from the New York State Handbook is that schools should make the arrangement for any students to take the assessments that they need, and schools should pay the fees for the assessments outlined below, right? So no student should ever be asked to pay for the assessments. Thank you to Aziz and his team for the bulk pricing that we're getting at the lowest possible rate. So the first step is going to be tomorrow to just talk to, is it your procurement specialist, your school leader, get an estimate of the number of students who are going to be taking the assessment. And that is going to inform the creation of a PO. But as Aziz is sharing right now, it's helpful to see the screenshots. They cannot move forward and order the assessments until they have that actual PO.
thank you, Jill. And I
Yeah.
do want to mention, sometimes we do, generally speaking, from Avant's standpoint, we do accept a signed quote because it is an agreement on the deliverables. However, with our work with New York City, we just came to the realization that we really cannot just move forward with a signed quote until we get the PO, because that just creates a hiccup on accounts payable side of things, and just a lot of back and forth with the folks over there. So yeah, this will make it a lot smoother once we have the PO. So as soon as we have the PO, I'll send you the test setup form, which is basically an Excel sheet that will look fairly similar to this one. Usually I would pre-fill some of this information right here, and then you would include the testing information, so the group names. Actually, I'm just gonna pull up this one right here. Like I said, I'll, John Doe, the position, the phone, and then the district or organization is gonna be New York City Department of Education, and then for the school name, for example, it's the school name is John F. Kennedy. You would include that right there. However, now with the work that we're doing with New York City, I think the DBN will be required. Is that correct, Jill?
We were just trying to make it easier for everyone, and we were thinking about having a drop down. I would give Aziz the list of the 138 participating schools, the DBN and the school name, and then you would pick your.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would try to put as much information as I could, if I know them, obviously. So if it's JFK and I know the DBN number, I'll just put it in for you. And then all you need to do is to include the group name. So if it's Spanish syllable literacy, you can just call it Spanish. Just gonna type it Spanish. Something like that, and then you select the drop down, you select the language from the drop down list, and then you specify the testing window. Please give our support team at least a week of processing time, a week or 10 days of processing time. So 10 business days is perfect. So it gives us time to process your order and gives you some time to go through your devices, have your students go through the sample test, make sure that everything is working properly. So that's going to be really critical. So once you have that completed and shared with us, the team will create the logins and share that with you. So they'll create the codes and send it with you. All right, I'm seeing Maria had a hand raised. Maria, you're muted if you're saying something.
I'm sorry. So we have to submit, each school has to submit a PO, correct? Like
Correct.
it's not, Jill is not submitting one PO for everybody. Each
No.
school is submitting one.
I
Yeah.
cannot this year. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
sorry. Yep.
But what if I'm asked like, how much money do you need? Because that's what my APO asked me. Well, how much do you need for STEM for us?
Yeah.
Because
And
he needs to like find a way, to pay for the tests.
All right. So what I would ask you is how
Mhm.
many students do you plan to assess? And once I have that number, if you
Mhm.
already have an estimate,
Yeah.
you can give me that number and I'll create a quote and then you can share it with your people.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
thank
The
you.
quote is, yeah, we'll specify the estimated that you need.
Excellent, thank you.
No problem. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much the setup. So you let me know how many, the languages, I'll create a quote. Once we receive the PO, you will get the test setup form, which is this one. And then you would include your testing information, the group names, the testing window, and then once we have that, the team will create the logins for you. And then the login process is it's just exactly what we went through. All students in that same group will use the same group test code and password. As a new test taker, they'll click on Start New Test, and then they'll be asked to create a unique login name, which is their ID number. And then a profile page to add more information about that individual, and then they'll start testing right away. The reporting end of things is fairly similar. You'll use the same universal login page, and then you'll use that report code and password to access the results. Okay. You can always download the results as an Excel sheet if you want to create your own charts, and if you want to download them as PDFs or print them, you can always do that. All right, so Avi has a hand raised.
Thanks, Aziz. I appreciate it. I think I know the answer to it, and if it's the no that I think it is, Jill, I have a question for you later on, but I won't take everyone's time now. I looked at the list. I didn't see Georgian or Ukrainian. Is the stamp 4S available in Georgian or Ukrainian?
It is available in Ukrainian, not Georgian though. Not yet, at least.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, and I have the slides, we're going to combine slides, which are the Avant stamp 4S languages and which are the WS languages, right? The 4S being 4 skills and WS being 2 skills. So yeah, Ukrainian is on the WS. So for Georgian, I think maybe there's an OPI. I'll look it up right now.
Yeah, I think there's an OPI for.
Yeah. So
Georgian.
this is, I know, Aziz doesn't love hearing talking about the other vendor, but Avant does not have every language you may need, right? So for other languages, for example, Georgian, you might need to then also open a PO with LTI for the OPI.
Yeah, that's
And
what I was
there's
afraid of. And the WS, the two modality
skill one.
WS,
Yep.
that is not good enough for the seal of biliteracy.
It is good.
It is good. Yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
approved.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I want to add real quick, Jill. So, like I said, it's not that I don't like it. It's more of, you know, we're serving the same purpose.
Yeah.
It's of course we want to be able to assess everybody and help people speaking on all the different languages. However, of course, you do have the OPI, WPT as an alternative, and then there are a lot of people who are using Alta as well because they do have an extensive list of languages. So between these two, usually you'd be covered, especially if you don't have that language at that point of time. We also are constantly releasing new languages. So we're hoping that we're going to have Bengali available over the next few weeks. So a lot of students will be able to test using Bengali this spring. There are a handful more tests that are going to, or languages that are going to be available either later this spring or later this year. So you're going to be able to test in the fall or even the following spring for the other languages.
Yep. Yeah, and I have a few slides just with the different languages for each of them, but yeah. So, oh, okay. So do you mind letting me share my screen, Aziz?
Absolutely. As I was just going to say, this is what I wanted to cover real quick.
Yep.
You know, everything else is pretty much answering questions.
So let me just kind of, because I see Gabriella's question, because Bengali, and I just talked to Aziz about this, right? So Bengali is one where we have a lot of students pursuing the seal in Bengali. So again, he walked us through the Avant Stamp 4S. So that's the 4 skills. And here's the list of languages on the right. Again, I will send you all of these slides and the recording, so you have it. These are the ones that are currently available in Stamp 4S. And again, the default is that students would be typing, right? If students really need that handwritten, that's additional $5 per student. So we'll have to think through that. And then the WS, which is accepted, even though it's just those 2 skills, is available in these languages. There are additional ones, but they've like Hawaiian and 2 different Somali dialects, but those have never come up in New York City, so I didn't put them here to save space and make sure it's larger for you. And Aziz has promised me that the Bengali exam will be available in April. So Gabriella, for your Bengali speakers who need the 2D assessment, I would say add them in to your pricing and your quote and your estimate for your Avant PO. And then later in April, he's thinking definitely by May 1st, the Bengali stamp WS will be available and you can administer to those students.
Thank you, Sheila.
Sure. And then, yeah, here's exactly what I put in the chat. Again, I'll send these to you. The first step's just to figure out who is giving you funding, applying the rate that's for planning purposes, contact Aziz. And then I put it in the chat, but there's always a case in which students need to retake a portion, right? They passed with a 7 on 3 sections and 1 section, they only got a 5. So because the PO deadline will have closed, you'll be able to pay for retakes if you add an additional portion when you originally order. And to Greg's point earlier, the tests purchased are available to use for 2 academic years, so they won't go to waste, which is good. Yeah. And planning for testing, again, I'll send this to you, but after April 1st, and then by May 24th for seniors, and then he'll walk you through the test setup score. And then I'll send this to you, but there are student resources, right? So you'll let students review the writing examples guide, make sure they're comfortable with the keyboard. And then there are video tutorials similar to if you've administered Apple, right? They're student-facing videos to help them understand what to expect. And there's a sample test that you can take as well. Okay, that's what I had that I think. Okay, so I'll stop sharing and questions. Yeah, for Aziz.
Quick question. I don't know if it was addressed. We can, you do offer it in English if a
Yes.
student, if it's missing a point.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, so calculate the cost for retakes, right? So a retake is $10 to retake 1 section, which is like half of the other one, right? But if they need to retake 2 sections, they have to retake the whole test, right? Or it's the cost of the whole test.
Yeah, so one student can retake 1 section only. And if that particular student needs to retake more than 1 section, so 2 or more, they need to retake the whole thing after 90 days. So the retake of that 1 section has to be within the first 90 days. And then if they need to take 2 or more sections, they need to retake the whole thing after 90 days.
Really? After 90 days? So for example, if they took it April 15th and they passed 2 sections and needed to retake 2 sections, are you saying not until July could they retake it?
Ideally, I mean,
Well, that's not, I
yeah,
thought it was within 90 days because that wouldn't work for our students.
the retake for 1 section is within 90 days. The whole test is after 90 days. The reason that being is mainly because a lot of students would retake these 2 sections and not get a high score because they just didn't really improve their proficiency levels. Usually, I mean, as long as it's not within that month, so students can have time to improve their language skills. It's really up to you if you want to retake, or the school, if you want to have that student retake the whole test. I know this is going to be their last shot, but the chances are, and this is why we implemented this policy, is because not many students do get a higher score, even if they retake the whole test within that month. So they can retake it, the school will absorb the cost. However, the student would still not get that high of a level. This is why we just have this policy, just to clarify. But yeah, if you want to do it this way, if you really believe that the student will do a better, will get a better score and a second chance, by all means. Okay.
Okay, and Chan had said, I mean, a lot of the students are, they're very busy during the day. They want to take it at home. Is there a computer proctoring at home option for Avant? And then is there an additional cost for that?
Yes and yes. So we do have a remote proctoring option. Test takers will schedule a time with a proctor virtually, and it is a $15 fee.
So for each student who doesn't think they would be able to fit it in the school day or do it at school, then Chan for those students should be assuming a rate of what, 1990 plus 15, so 3490 for each of those students?
Just about, yep.
Okay. And Amy's saying that they don't allow remote proctoring for checkpoint B exams, but
and the other piece, remote proctoring does not support handwriting. It's very rare that I see this, but it happened before, so I just want to mention it.
Yeah. So if at all possible, it'll be great if you can talk to them and say, really try to coordinate a computer lab at school as possible. But we understand students are busy and have outside requirement.
And then one thing that I want to add real quick before I forget about it is the retake fees. We can convert stamp credits, so it's 2 retakes for 1 stamp test. So if you have, let's say, 2 different students that want to retake 1 section of that test, then you can consume one of the tests that you have as quote unquote credits to cover these the retake fees.
Awesome.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I see a hand raised.
Hey, thanks. Jill, I heard you mention the checkpoint B exams. That's a different, I'm not worrying about that in this PO. Is that right? I'm not.
Correct. And I think Amy's still here actually, but the Avant stamp assessments. Amy, do you want to speak to this? Those are covered by Office of Assessment, but if they get a checkpoint C score, for example.
Oh, so it's hard for me to cover without a slide because I don't want to misspeak, but that would be right. So for whatever purpose you're taking the exam, if you get a checkpoint C score, then, you know, it would be eligible for using for your purposes as well. Is that what you're asking, Jill?
Yeah, so it sounds like certain high schools, right, will be ordering Avant stamp assessments through the Office of Assessment for their students taking the checkpoint B exam in +1 languages, for example. That is a separate process, and that's why I'm talking to Amy so much about this. So you might be doing that process through the Office of Assessment, and the Office of Assessment covers those. Then this process that we're talking about in creating a PO is for students who are definitely taking these assessments for the seal of biliteracy. Hope that makes sense.
I think that is clear.
Well, I mean,
Does that make sense? Yeah.
yeah. So these are 2, I mean, the stamp test, I guess I have a question for Jill and Amy, because I get this every now and then. If one test taker was able to get, let's say, intermediate high, the qualifying score for the seal, also wants to fulfill the checkpoint B, can they use the same data point for both?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sweet.
But that bears some clarification. Did we just say that if a student takes the Stamp 4S for the seal of biliteracy and achieves a score of intermediate high on the seal of biliteracy Stamp 4S exam, we can use that as their LOTE exam for a +1 graduation credit?
As long as it's one of the languages that was approved by New York State for +1 purposes.
Yep. A double
So,
dip.
so actually to this point, Amy, okay, so for example, if students then, Avi's students are planning to take, and Avi's planning, having all these students take the Avant stamp for us that he ordered with a PO for NYSSB purposes, and then they take that in May and they get the score they need for the seal, then does that mean then that they pass, of course, if they get the score for the seal, then they have gotten the score for checkpoint B, which means those students will then not need to take the exam through you? Oh boy.
You would not need to test twice.
Right.
So if you can give me an example of a language, I could answer specifically to that one. I think if we're talking generally, it could get more confusing. So, but what you're saying is right. If the student has a intermediate high score, and they need, yes, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it has to be approved, like you said, from
Russian.
the level. Russian
Yeah.
is a good example. Arabic is a good. So all 4S languages are approved for both. Just so I'm clear, the 4S languages only are approved for both. The WS is approved for the seal of biliteracy, only, not for the pathway for +1. So that's just the other thing, and we're still working with the state, just to see how we can tackle that, just to make it available, in addition to ASL and Latin and Chaldean, because that's another quote unquote classical language. But yeah, more things to come, obviously. But 4S, just to highlight, right now, 4S is approved for both checkpoint B and C.
And then Amy, if I miss one of my kids that I want to get one of those +1 exams, that can be covered later on in the school year. I don't squeeze them into my PO for whatever reason. We can cover those +1 exams later on in the school year.
If they were scheduled for basically, yes. If they were scheduled for the exam and they take the exam, then yes. Yes, we'll go ahead and say yes to that question.
You say if they
If the
were
student,
scheduled
well,
for those
if the
exams,
student, yeah, if the
did
student
that
takes
have
the
to be done
exam,
already?
no,
Okay.
you can schedule the student.
Yeah, so that's why Amy and I talk so much, because the timelines are a little different, right? And so like the process through her office for checkpoint B exams and the ordering process is different than for the SEAL exams where you're owning it and creating the PO at the school level. So yeah.
Well, the reason
And I should also,
I was just gonna say, I opened a whole can of worms, but I think this is helpful to know because I personally get this question. I'm a little confused about it every now and then. So thank you for the clarification. And I do want to add some schools that are testing for checkpoint B using the 4S assessment. They use that as baseline even, you know, because it's not necessarily a graduating senior that will use the 4S assessment for checkpoint B. So it could be a junior or something like that. So even if it's a senior and they covered it, you still have 2 administrations. If it's a student, if that student is a junior, you got that baseline, you can test them again as a senior to fulfill that requirement. Ideally, one covers both checkpoints, but if not, you still have that data point to help you to at least help that student improve for the next testing session.
Other questions at 3:54? I'm gonna share my screen again and just kind of, I hope I'm sharing the right screen. Hold on, I have a lot of, sorry. This slide, looking ahead, right? So looking ahead, and again, ordering the assessments, again, you'll get all this, the student resources, and World Languages Week is coming up. So this is kind of unrelated to this, but we want to hear from your students working on the seal of biliteracy, your students getting ready for their assessments, your students in your courses. And so I'll send this to you. I want to hear from you, the coordinators who are supporting these students in this. So please share samples, short videos, even if it's 30 seconds or so. And we want to celebrate them and excite your 10th and 11th graders about the SEAL too. We have 3 videos on a YouTube playlist. I shared those with CUNY the other day in a conversation. I shared them with Senator Schumer's office last week in a conversation. And people, the decision makers, the stakeholders love hearing from students. So that helps. So hopefully at 3:56, you're able to articulate what Avant assessments are available and in which languages. And then you're also able to articulate the process to order Avant assessments and next steps you have. So final questions.
Sorry, I had to duck out for a minute, but I put a question in the chat. Can the students use their own school provided laptops for this?
Yes.
Okay.
The short answer is yes. I mean, the tests supported using Macs, PCs, Chromebooks, tablets. Ideally, have them go through a sample test. Please, please, please. Because, you know, sample tests will act as the first check to make sure that everything is working properly. If not, you can work internally with your team or call our support team to help you out with whatever you need.
Okay.
Make sure this is all done before taking a full test because, you know, taking a full test can come with some, I don't know, anxiety from the student standpoint. So you don't want to have that to happen because technical are fun sometimes.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Could you go over the scores again for the English versus the Chinese and Spanish for the biliteracy?
So it's a score of 6. You're asking about the requirement, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a score of 6 across all 4 skills, and which corresponds to intermediate high. So that's the requirement for the seal.
Yeah, I'm in this communication, which is going to come out to you. That has all those links, including the chart. Yeah, and the scores for each.
Yep.
Yep, so for Avant, stamp for us, that's a 6, yep. And then again in for us, the category 1-2 languages, that's a 6, as Aziz said, and then 3-4, it's a 5. And then for world speak, which is the WS, right? It's now just referred to as the WS. That's the I5 or I2. Yeah. So again, this is the document you're going to get with all this information, and then getting started, things like that. So you will get that by tomorrow. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Aziz. Aziz is like getting ready to travel, and I was like, Aziz, I have 3 to 4 p.m. And so it was put together. I mean, it's great information. We did record this. Amy Paraplechikov, thank you for being here and speaking to this. Yeah. Yeah, appreciate you all.
If you have any questions regarding the actual assessments,